It's actually, except now it's been determined that it's not. They actually do not have to follow Part 15. There's a big legal to do about that, but it's already been unfortunately battled in court and won. They do not have to do anything about that solar noise. That was always the thought of it, was Part 15, but they're actually exempt from Part 15 because of some some utilities commission, something or other.
No, they're exempt because they have better lawyers.
Yeah.
I don't know why they wouldn't come under unintentional radiator under Part 15, because power companies have to clean up their noise.
Yeah, and
because as Darren said, they have better lawyers.
You saying that reminded me, because I had this discussion with them. It has, you are right. It has something to do with the power lines being the radiator, but since it's not the power company's equipment, and it's actually like a customer responsibility, and I don't remember all the details. They told me in great detail what it was. SolarEdge, everyone else tells you to just go away, but SolarEdge will actually come out and fix things. And they knew the law, and they knew they were not on the hook for the law. They explained it all very well to me, but they're very willing to come take care of it. So that was a big blessing for me.
Well, it's also, what kind of solar panel do you have? I have solar panels on my house, but they have a built-in micro inverter in each panel. So it's already goes from DC to AC immediately, and it's all grounded and everything. And I don't have any trouble with on my radio.
Those are generally the ones that have the problems. It's the inverter that's causing the interference. So it must be the manufacturer took steps to quiet the inverters. I mean, did you tell them you were a ham before you they put them up?
They shut my antenna up on the thing, and it's like mine are really good. I have no noise coming in on the power, but like I say, they have a completely they grounded everything on the roof separately from the rest of the panel.
You have no noise on HF or VHF UHF?
Neither, because I can have my 2 meter on in the house, my little handy, and I can hear 275 well.
Yeah, the problem is generally in the HF spectrum. It was actually kind of interesting when I wrote to the installer company about my neighbor's panels, and they forwarded it on to SolarEdge, the manufacturer. The first email back from SolarEdge said, "Hey, do you have a carrier that's this wide at this frequency?" And they gave me all these lists. They knew exactly what the problem was. I mean, they asked all these tech questions about very specific frequencies and bandwidths and types of noise. And I was like, oh yeah, got that. And they're like, okay, we'll bring out a different model.
Well, it's after 9 o'clock, so I hate to interrupt this, but I think we need to get going. Thank you very much. First of all, let's go around the horn and see who you all are. Who are you, Mark?
Mark, N7CTM Firestone.
John, NK0R Loveland.
Ray, W8LYJ. I don't know why it's not showing my picture.
I'm Jerry, NW0W.
Craig, N0EMP.
James?
AE0LCK, the other Mike from Windsor.
Jim, K6ET, Loveland, and Greg, your audio is almost non-existent.
Bill, K0UT, Fort Collins.
David, K6OG, Estes Park.
Jim, K0BEC.
Jerry, K8GEE.
Roger,
Go
ahead.
Dom, N0KBX, Wellington.
Roger, KG0I, Greeley.
John
Dick,
B.
KE0ME, Loveland.
John,
Rob
N5WMS.
W0FT Loveland.
Chris
Jeremy
KF0CAB.
N0AW in Fort Collins.
Damon M0FON in Holyoke.
Glenn K0GCB in Fort Collins.
Ted here in Loveland, N0RQV.
A2 Alpha Delta Firestone.
Tony, KD0WDX.
Mark 80KO Windsor.
Scott, KD0YLP, Fort Collins.
Mark, AE0DJ in Fort Collins.
Bill, AB4TC, Fort Collins.
Mike, we're not getting any audio from you, Mr. Pollmann.
Can you hear it now? Mike Pollmann N0YLS.
Thank you.
Ron, KF0AZA, Fort Collins.
Andy, AA0CM in Masonville.
These are where they're all located.
Greg N0EMP again. How's my audio now?
Very good. Thanks, Greg.
Thank you.
And K0ARD, Fort Collins.
Ron, KF0AZA, Fort Collins. And no audio.
I don't think that's it because I know 2 people that haven't signed in yet. Where'd they go? Well, anyway, let's continue on. Everybody got the newsletter? Yes, no, maybe, none of the above? Doug, you did. Did not, Doug?
For some reason, my emails got caught in the spam filter or something.
Oh, okay. Well, if you're interested, it's on the website under information. I think it is meeting information. It just says newsletter. You can click on it. And you did a great job.
Okay, now, thank you.
Yes, we do have that available. When I get it, I usually try to post it up there. Does anybody have any questions about anything that was on it that actually read it or not read it?
I just have one quick comment about it.
Go ahead.
It was the article from had my name listed as the author from the presentation for Solar Cycle and that, and it was actually
Sorry about that, Tim. Yeah, that was actually
W0ASP. So
yeah, I'm sorry about that. I mixed it up. I need a proofreader.
no worries. Figure I just let people know on here that who the author is supposed to be.
Who was it?
Terry, when he did the presentation on solar cycle and sunspots.
Oh, okay. Anything else?
I have a quick question, Joe.
Yes.
Since we have a newsletters section under our website and we don't seem to put them there anymore, can we either put them there or get rid of that?
I can definitely put it there.
My thought was to add a column to the meeting information and start posting them there.
Because I've been searching here. I can't even find this one.
Go to meeting.
Where we keep all the minutes and agendas.
Yep.
Okay.
It's right next to it. But
it's a good
Darren,
point.
I don't care where we put it. Maybe I'm putting it there, putting it wrong.
Call me crazy, but I just thought newsletters is a good place to put newsletters.
Yeah. I have a hard time finding things on our website sometimes.
Well, Send me suggestions.
Okay.
So do we want to post that thing on newsletters or not?
It is
Yeah.
the newsletter.
Sure.
Okay, that's my fault. I just posted there because somebody else had posted one there, so I did it. So anyway, okay, we'll go ahead and change that. Okay. If you'll notice the tech report, we've done a lot of different things since then, and I've got a lot of things on my agenda that will address the things that were not on the tech report. So anyway. January 16th, we're having a tech fest. So far, we have 4 people lined up. We're looking for 2 more. We're also going to have, we have our MCs, if you will, and Rob is going to be one of them. We have John Maxfield and Phil Burke will be our MCs for that show. Again, we're going to start, we hope, at 8 o'clock and run till 2 to 4, something like that in the afternoon. It is a free Zoom program. And Darren, do you have any more information about how we're going to handle that?
Not at this time.
Okay.
It's going to be a Zoom seminar, I believe they call it.
And you will need to register for it. Again, it is a free service. You do not have to be a member to participate. So if you've got some friends that might be interested in it, more than happy you can pass a note on to them when we get it sent out. On December 5th, we have the Saturday. Oh, with any questions? I'm sorry. Any questions about the Tech Fest? Okay. On December 5th, we have a Saturday, a rare Saturday test session we're going to do. And Darren will be putting out the information on that. Again, we will have only 4 people, 2 sessions, one 9:30 and one at 11.
Joe, that might change. I don't know if you've seen the most recent report. Larimer County is going to level red on the COVID scale as of Wednesday.
Huh. Okay. Well, I guess to be determined then.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that. Okay. Anyway, jumping into new business, on December 7th, 9th, and 14th, we're having a DMR, let's call it a conference, if you will. We're going to send out an invitation to Aries and club members to attend this if they'd like. And again, you'll have to register it because it's going to be a Zoom meeting. And what it is, it's going to be more of a question and answer. We'll have a short briefing, if you will, or something from our instructors, but it's not going to be an instructional class like we've done before. We're going to give a little bit of like a 15-minute thing and then open up the rest of the time for questions and answers on DMR. We ran into this with one of our directors meetings that people are just saying, I just don't understand this thing. And you know, I've heard it before that a lot of people will go to the trash can with that DMR. And we want to be able to answer these questions. And maybe I feel we haven't covered all the questions that could be out there. So that again will be 3 days. It's a Monday, Wednesday, and then again another Monday. Time, I think we're talking about 7 o'clock in the evening. Any questions?
Dates again, please.
I'm sorry?
Date again, please.
It's going to be December 7th, 9th, and 14th at 7 p.m.
Thank you.
And when we get a video that I can send out, I sent out one to the guys. I haven't heard anything back from them. But I'm going to send that out, and then we'll ask for people to come in and do it. We also are thinking about very seriously coming up with a WinLink instructional video via Zoom. And it's primarily for the Aries folks, but anybody can join us for that particular thing. We're going to do a little bit of hands-on. We really rather do it one-on-one, but as Jim said, we can't do that. So we're going to try to put together something where you'll be able to see us do this live. And I have to admit, I'm just getting into that, and I was surprised. I thought you just plugged a radio in a computer. That's not how it works. It's a little bit more technical than that. I'm going
Joe,
to turn. Go ahead.
Are these 3 sessions the same that you're giving people an opportunity to attend one, or are they different program content?
They will be different program content.
Okay, so we want to hit all 3 if we can.
However, you can
I
ask
want to
questions.
mention that the intent is that these are like extended Q&As. So somebody can come in on one session with a problem. We either help them out, give them suggestions, and then they can come back at the next one and say, well, I tried A, B, and C, it didn't work, but this did, or give them something to go investigate. So it's kind of just more different sessions of the same Q&A session.
Any other questions, comments? Okay, I'm going to turn a lot of this over to James because this is a lot of his stuff. We're talking about upgrading Budweiser. Would you care to explain that to us, James, wherever you're at?
Yeah, let me, so if we're going down officer things, I had a 5-page tech report this month. Does anybody have any questions about anything? There was a lot of work done. And I did want to just spend 10 seconds saying thank you very much to those that offered to help or chip in with propane for our generator at Horsetooth. And just the 10-second version is they're still working on who owns it. And that's going to determine very much about who ends up paying to fill it and maintain it. It might be covered for us. We're just on hold waiting to hear what the final story is. So thank you anybody for that offered, and we're just kind of waiting to see where they end up. So Budweiser is currently a Yaesu Fusion repeater that is in multi-mode. It'll do analog or fusion. And we have tried to keep the Wires X link to the internet working. The Wires X software has got to be one of the worst pieces of software I've ever seen in my life. It's Windows only. And for some reason, the audio board just stops being recognized by Windows at random times, and a lot. I mean, reboot to reboot, sometimes in the middle of a session, the serial port stays connected the whole time. The audio board just disappears and the thing quits working. I've had the thing back to Yaesu for repair. I've talked to their techs time and time again. They basically, what they told me is that this system was never designed to be on an enterprise network, which is what it is at CSU. It was designed to be in someone's basement on their Comcast address, where you had easy access to it and things like that. And so that to me kind of indicates that it's not quite a prime time ready, piece of software, and it's hard to get to fix it, and very random how to fix it. So because it's rarely working, and we have identified what we believe is probably a more useful need, I would like to propose changing the Budweiser repeater from a combination analog/fusion with a mostly broken Wires X connection to an analog only that is connectable to, linkable to the rest of our system. So just bring it in line with all the other repeaters that we have, and make it a linkable asset, such that, for example, this past fire, we would have been able to link it to Buckhorn and had a Buckhorn and Budweiser link that would have really helped us keep in touch with our Estes Park folks, because their Estes Park has very specific areas to very specific repeaters that work well, and they were in a panic as they were getting evacuated. I think the 2-3 folks that live up there that are actively involved with our club did a fantastic job of shuffling things around and working to stay in touch. But we sure could have made both of our lives a lot easier had that been a linkable resource. So really, we can use the repeater that's still there. All we have to do is change the controller on it. And remember that we are not very far away from being able to roll out the multi-mode digital repeater at Buckhorn, thanks to a donation by Doug and Rocky Mountain Ham that'll allow us to explore many different modes that will properly work and be linkable other places on that multi-mode. So fusion in wires, fusion is not a thing of the past. Fusion and linking could still be done via that repeater and will probably be a far more reliable system than the Fusion Wires X. So that's the proposal, is to change Budweiser to analog only and make it linkable to the rest of the whole. It's not just our systems, remember. That's that would, you know, allow us to link between there and Loveland and, you know, the Rocky Mountain Ham, Colorado connection, all of the sites, the places we collaborate with, that ability would exist. Adding that site to that grouping of resources that could be interconnected should the need arise. So with that, is there any questions or comments about that? Anybody got any concerns or?
So James,
what are we talking about in the way of cost, James?
Mike, give me 1 second. GCB, I heard you first, and then I'll move over to you, Mike.
Okay. Yeah, James. So would we lose all fusion capability at Budweiser? I don't necessarily care about Wires X, but I was hoping to play around a little bit with fusion.
Well, so it would become an analog only repeater, and we would redirect to, you know, so the Buckhorn multi-mode could be placed in fusion, but yeah, this proposal would eliminate fusion as a mode for Budweiser.
Okay.
Mike?
Yes, I was just wondering about what are we talking in the way of costs for the change?
Well, that's an interesting question. The little modules we're using for our repeater controllers that were commercially available via a single hams business has gone out of business. However, the design is public. All the stuff is available. One of our counterparts in Canyon City has already built a couple of these controllers as a through-hole board. So the short answer is to build a controller that'll work and make this compatible today is probably going to be about $250. The long answer is that we're going to work on refining that design and potentially making them a little more en masse and designing out some of the flaws that are in that commercial controller. And if we get a group of hams together to do that, we expect that price to come down as we build them in, you know, maybe 10 at a time. But as of today, it's probably about $250 to build a single one as is to convert it.
So when you're talking about building multiple ones, you're saying that the ones that we aren't going to use for this particular site can be used at other sites, or allow them to be sold to the club?
You know, I don't really have any intention of becoming a business selling these things, but it would be nice to be able to have enough of these around that we, as the ones that we have deployed die or break, we can replace them with the new ones. Certainly, I'm not talking about any kind of mass production, but you know, there's certainly the desire to have what we have out there replaceable with something, and you know, hopefully a better design. And you know, we're all the clubs that are collaborating, so you know, Loveland and Colorado Connection, Rocky Mountain Ham, us, all the clubs that are CSU, we're all using the same device right now. So in an effort to try and stay in line with what that buys us, Mike, is that if for some reason something goes down and we don't have a spare on the shelf, or there's something there, we can reach out to our fellow clubs and, hey, can we borrow one of these things to get us back on the air quick until we can replace it. So there's some good reason to stay in that collaborative group.
Sounds reasonable. Thank you, James.
Can I jump in for half a second?
Go for it, Doug.
And I promise to be brief. So Yes,
Time's up.
basically, Mike, the modules that we're using are no longer available. This dynamic linkable system that we can reconfigure our network when things go down, like we had happen, is a very powerful platform. So this is a way to get a controller that's compatible with the old, but also available going forward. And our goal is not to make money on this thing. If we can find a company that's willing to sell these things and we can get them for less, we're certainly not going to eliminate that. But our goal is not to create a ham radio product to make money. And James, let us not talk about this on this call, but the Buckhorn multi-mode was on the narrow only, which wouldn't support fusion. So if we want to do that, we should talk and identify a new frequency. So we'll do that offline.
Okay, that's
Just
good
put it
point.
on your agenda.
Yeah, thank you. So, you know, this topic that we're talking about right now, though, is the conversion of Budweiser to analog. I heard from Glenn there about the desire to experiment with fusion. What are others' thoughts on this? You know, we exist as a club first to serve everyone in the community, and secondly to further ham radio and experimentation and stuff. So we want to make sure we're doing the right thing to serve those two purposes. I'd love to hear from others any questions, concerns, routes you'd like to see, etc.
Hey, James.
Rob.
The Budweiser has always been the primary repeater for the Loveland EOC, and as the combined EOC gets moved out there closer to the ranch, it's probably going to continue a lot of ARES and EOC support.
Yeah, that's a good point as well. We realize that ARES is a fine line with the club. You know, ARES is a public service entity that has an agreement with NCARC to support. They don't have dues or membership fees to help support that. So we want to make sure we're doing the proper balance of supporting ARES and making sure that we're doing what the club wants to do, since it's your dollars.
I might also mention one other thing that happened during the fire. Jim and I was probably the two people that were most close to it. And from a standpoint, we had a lot of people ask, well, what about my friend here and there up at Estes Park? That's not an ARES function. And I felt that was kind of an interesting and nice thing to do, to be able to relay information about people who were there and not. And so that could be something we could throw into this. And we worked, quite a few days on figuring out how to pull this off in Estes Park. And we got it right. And this will help tremendously. And like I said, it's more of a nicety if we can actually pass messages back and forth through NCARC. That's not necessarily an ARES function.
Let me ask this question. This might help a little bit. How many folks on the call either use fusion or have a desire to try fusion and and go that route? There's Glenn. I can't see. There's a lot of people on the call. Just give a quick shout on your microphone, please. Is there others besides Glenn?
W8LYJ.
Right.
KCTT. I've used fusion and found it very cumbersome on repeaters and ended up just going to a hotspot to use it.
Yeah, there's a lot of fusion in Maryland where I came from, a lot of it. And my complaint, fusion narrow, the audio quality is, it's hard to even recognize the person you're talking to.
Okay. Well, I think more to come on this. We just wanted to kind of throw this out here. We have I certainly don't want to take the club backwards in any kind of steps, but we have an identified need for life and safety and personal support. But I don't want to rip the rug out of something to allow us to innovate and do something new. So I more to come on this, but thank you for your feedback and input on that. We'll follow up more with the club as we go forward on that.
By the way, James, it would be really easy if people wanted to do it to put a repeater someplace that is accessible instead of the catwalk on top of the Budweiser event.
So Rob, I had that same thought. Depending on frequency coordination and things like that, it's possible we could still keep Fusion in the area and still change Budweiser to be a linkable repeater. So more to come. Got some exploring to do. I don't know what kind of we certainly have to make sure that there's coordinated things available, but we also want to make sure that we use those precious resources for the best good.
James, you want to talk about the microwave link between Rattlesnake and Buckhorn?
No, sure. Yeah. So, and by the way, folks, these projects we're talking about are all small dollar amount projects thus far. That's why we're not bringing this to formal vote for funding as of right now. During the fire, as you probably know, we lost power at Horsetooth multiple times and for multiple days. The first time it happened, we lost the site entirely. No microwave link, and as it turns out, that is a fairly critical hub in our microwave link system to allow the voting receivers that are there to work for Buckhorn, to control things. The ironic part of this is we actually have an internet connected backdoor up at Buckhorn just in case the microwave was to fail and we couldn't get there. But because the power was cut to that mountain while they were rerouting things and we were without power on Buckhorn for a short time, when the power came back, our internet provider, their equipment didn't come back. And so even though there was power on the mountain, it was unreachable because it was in the evacuation zone and we had no backdoor in there. So upon a little further investigation, we believe that we can, with enough of a mast height at Rattlesnake Ranch, put an additional microwave link in from Rattlesnake straight to Buckhorn. And since Rattlesnake is an all solar site that we have 100% control over everything, including the power, we believe that would be an excellent back entrance that once again does not rely on any commercial provider to allow our voters and our control and linkability and all that stuff to continue to work. So we're working on getting a tower section up there right now and a mast. We have some and maybe all of the gear necessary to do that microwave link as it sits. If we have, depending on the path, we may have to up one side of it, which would be, potentially a $200 or $250 investment to improve one side of that link. So that is currently being studied it's being not studied, it's being followed as a possible path forward to help us with that, just redundancy of our links there. So is any questions, comments, concerns about that?
No, but I love the idea. What about the power aspect of our repeaters when there is large power outages? Because anytime there's a fire, the fire department cuts power to everything for weeks. Typically, so I've had power cut to my house twice for 2 weeks for 2 different fires. So how are we sitting for power?
So Buckhorn East, which is our NCARC site, we are housed by Poudre Valley REA, the power company. And so we're in really, really good shape there. That site is on a generator that is maintained, fueled regularly. And since PVREA has access to all those areas, including that site. That's also their primary communication site for the power company. So our Buckhorn repeaters from a power standpoint are fantastic. PVREA takes really, really good care of us, and we've got a good power system there. We do have a little battery backup there to carry us from power out to generator start, but that's because it's a maintained and exercised generator. That time period is usually just seconds. Horsetooth is a bigger and severely more complicated answer. If it ends up being that one of the tower company or somebody ends up picking up the tab on that generator and deciding to fuel it, we'll be in good shape there too. You know, running on generator. Doug was incredibly kind to us and donated a very, very nice large set of new batteries for Horsetooth that are able to keep our microwave links running. If we shut down the repeaters and just run on the hub, you know, we don't know exactly, but I would believe that it's at least a week of power to the hub. Now, solar is a possibility at Horsetooth, but so it's a technical possibility. The reason this gets a little more complicated is not only is there some disputes about the generator ownership and who's going to take care of that, but we just got a new site manager from Crown Castle. He's brand new to us and to the site. He doesn't actually really know anything about ham radio, and his boss is brand new at the same time. And to make things a little more tense, that tower company just laid off 200 people in the area. So it's a little bit eggshell right now. We are still completely in compliance with our contract, and I've already made great headway in a relationship with our new site manager in teaching him what we do and how we can be helpful and things like that. But ultimately, I believe that we will be in a better position on Horsetooth for power before this is all over, but we need to be a little patient. We either have to build a relationship that's going to allow us to put the solar in there, or see if one of the companies steps up and maintains the generator. Either way, I'm following it closely, staying in touch and making myself as absolutely useful and available to the tower company as I can, just to you know, we have a $0 lease there, which is almost unheard of these days. We have to show our value in other ways. And so I'm, you know, doing our very, very best at trying to maintain the good relationship that will allow us to stay there, and at the same time work on the back channel on keeping the power reliable. Everything else, Budweiser is on a big generator. We don't have a battery backup there, so when power fails, it's just basically a reboot of the equipment, but they've got very reliable power and a very reliable backup power source. And so those are, you know, those are the main sites of concern for wide area. And CSU is also in the same boat. No battery there, but we're a very good and actually a brand new generator, so it's just a reboot and things come back. And Greeley at UNC is just reliant on city power.
Hey, James, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Probably a newbie question, but where and what is Rattlesnake? I'm not familiar with that.
Rattlesnake Ranch is a site that is, it's a property that is owned by NØEMP, our board, one of our members at large here on the NCRC board. It's at almost the very top of the Whale Rock subdivision. So it's about halfway between Horsetooth and Buckhorn, essentially.
James, don't you have a picture of that?
I have a picture of, I certainly have a picture of the...
Darren, can we share that to let everybody know what it actually looks like?
You have share capability.
Oh, okay.
And it's yeah, so Greg and his wife kindly allow us.
James, why don't you just pull up the live feed?
Pull up. Well, yeah, I can do that. Let me bring.
Must be below the ridge line.
It's ever so slightly below. So this is the inside of the site, and this was just, I think I put some pictures in the newsletter of this. This is the voter hotel that we keep talking about. And those are the stacks of receivers going in and slowly being rolled out, and the receiver coupler. The outside is this box with, there's two of the microwave links, one that looks at CSU, one that looks at Horsetooth, and some of the antennas, camera, GPS antenna. And as Darren said, we actually have live views of, this is a camera, that's Greg's little cabin there. That's looking to the north from the site. And this is looking to the east, basically, maybe southeast a little bit. There's our solar panels. That's Horsetooth Reservoir. You can see right along the center of the picture at the top. And right about where the picture hits the border, that's Horsetooth Mountain. So that's Rattlesnake. And
okay, so we've got supporting electronics, but not a repeater.
There are currently all receivers there. There are currently no full repeaters there. The tactic at that site has changed a little bit. We originally thought we would put backup full-blown repeaters there, and we still are going to have a capability of doing that. But the primary focus, this site is incredibly quiet. Greg, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe he has a Kiwi SDR receiver up there with Glenn, and I believe it's one of the quietest sites anywhere in the worldwide network of those SDRs. Am I saying that right, Greg?
Yeah, you are actually. UHF quiet. So one of the problems when we get to a site like Buckhorn or Horsetooth is there's so much RF locally that it overloads receivers. Frequently an HT won't even work at those sites because there's so much RF. So we're using this as a receive only site, keeping it quiet with the ability, if we need to, we want a full duplicate of the 275 repeater up there and the ability to transmit. So in an emergency, it's winter, all the roads are closed, Horsetooth goes down, we've lost our primary repeater, we can duplicate it there, but it will normally be a receive only site.
Right. And, just to be fair, Horsetooth power is pretty solid. This, you were right, they cut the power because of the fire, and we were in the same grid as some of the things there. But as far as power normally, it's pretty solid. Does that answer the question on Rattlesnake? And
it does. Thank you very much. Very helpful.
And you'll notice on the photo that James had, we have both omnidirectional and directional antennas on the shelter. And depending on what repeaters, voting receiver we're looking at, we can either aim signal out to the east, to the south, southeast on the Omni. We can add more receive antennas very easily. Up there they are. There's a UHF and a VHF Yagi currently there, and Omnis that. So if we want signal looking out to the due east for the weather spotters, we can put a reasonable Yagi array there and just beam out to Sterling and get a little bit of gain and pick it up on a receiver. That was the whole concept.
Yeah. Any other questions for James? I'd like to thank everybody who participated during the fire. Doug, I don't know what I would have done without you. You and I were on the phone pretty much when James was gone, and I do appreciate all your help and and loaning the batteries. You went way beyond what what you should have done, but thank you so much.
Well, and you're welcome, but that's what we do for our community. And I didn't loan them. I've given them to the club because we need them and keeping this system running. You saw in the rattlesnake photo, there was our batteries. That's 12 volts for those of you that are, and I know a lot of you on this call are battery savvy. That's 12 volts at 300 amp hours, I believe, James, or are those 200? Those are 300 amp hours. They're 2-volt cells. Yep, like 2.2, 2.1 volt cells, 300 amp hours. We have an identical setup at the Buckhorn West site. The only difference is we have double this. So we have 600 amp hours to run those repeaters, so that when we do place a multi-mode up there, or the DMR that we share with the club, between our clubs and Aries, we'll have very substantial battery backup. And what we can do is program the repeaters when they're on batteries to reduce their output power to conserve and still remain online and keep our microwave online. So, but this is what we need to do. We're doing the right things. We're building dynamic, remotely controlled things that we just don't willy-nilly link to things. We move them because of a need. And Joe, we did a very good job. You did a very good job with your leadership in very changing times, keeping us from ping-ponging all over the place. And I appreciate that leadership. So thank you.
Couldn't have done it without you. James, do you have a picture of the outside of our little box, for lack of knowing what to call it?
Yes.
I thought you did.
While you're doing that, what's the battery chemistry?
Those are SLA.
Got it.
And
we need to do something at Loveland, so we'll talk.
Those are, yeah, that's SLA, and it's 80 amps of charge capability from the solar.
Rob, we can take it offline. We just put an initiative with the Colorado Connection to install about 300 amp hours at our Colorado Springs site. So we're going to do similar at Almagre and maybe one of the other sites. So I'm going to be bulk buying AGM 150 amp hour cells. If you want to get in on that, I can get I'll offer them at essentially our dealer cost to the ham clubs. And they're not going to be cheap, but it provides a lot of packs, a lot of power in the punch there. So we could talk offline if you're interested.
Yep, we'll definitely do that. We'll have a meeting here the 5th of December, and I'll throw it out to the membership here and see where we go.
Yeah, a large storage capacity battery is for a 12 volt cell, not like those, but a 12 volt 100 amp hour is almost $300. And if we get into the 150 to 200, they can be as much as 600 a cell. I'm shopping around and buying in volume and seeing if I can get them shipped for a reasonable price. And I think I can bring that down to, my goal is in the $400 a cell range.
Yeah, but Doug,
but that's what you need. Those cells that I gave for Horsetooth, if we were to buy those, they're about 350 a cell, and there were 2 of them there. So, but that'll keep us going for a long time up at Horsetooth. We've got cells at Buckhorn and Buckhorn East and West. So we're in pretty good shape.
Yeah, I looked at the price on those cells, Doug. I think that you're pretty low on your guess right now.
Well, I've been talking to the distributor that I buy most of my
there you go.
radio equipment from, and they're giving me pretty good prices, especially when I said, well, some of these are for commercial, some of these are for a nonprofit that I'm involved with. And she said, okay, I'll give you a little bit more of a price break.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to drive it down. I'm trying to buy a full pallet load or 2 pallet loads. And at that point, they might even pay for the freight. So, yeah, that's what I'm working on. I got all the paper. Well, you can't see it with the thing here, but all the specs, and I've been working on that this late last week and next week to finalize that deal.
Thank you, Doug, for that. This is actually this is an early picture of
Yeah.
the box. I think that was when we first got up there, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yep. This was there was nothing there but the microwave and a single like a WinLink or something like that. But that
Where's the photo of James on this one?
Oh, this is the photo before we leveled the solar panels.
Yeah, they're kind of just laying there. I remember
We had one that
them.
James was playing Price is Right model on, and it was a good photo.
I wanted everybody to see that, and Greg, I thank you so much for letting us do this. This has been really, really a lifesaver in a lot of things.
My pleasure, Joe.
Yep. So,
well, getting back to our thing here, I want to thank James, Jim, and especially Darren for supporting our Zoom habit. These guys have been actually using their own accounts to run Zoom. So at the board meeting the other day, we proposed $150 or whatever it is to get an annual Zoom license for the club, which everybody on the board can use, and various other things for different things. And we use it a lot. And I do appreciate you guys jumping in and doing it, especially you, Darren. I don't think you've had a weekend off. You've been Zooming all the time. So, and I do appreciate that. I mean, he runs all the things and sets it all up, and it's timeless. So we do have a Zoom license. I think it starts on December 1st, right?
Yeah, we can do that.
I thought you were tying it together with the other one.
Yeah,
I don't.
I am.
Okay.
I was actually going to get it a little bit before that.
Okay. We've actually talked about the Horsetooth update, so that was my next thing. So I think that's pretty much done. Anybody from the board have anything else they'd like to discuss? Are there any questions for the board? Well, I'd like to say, where is he? Mr. Pollmann, I have not heard from you. I didn't know you were back. Welcome, welcome. I'll give you a call. Thank you very much for being online with us. I don't know where he's at. So anyway, I'm going to turn this over to Greg. He's got his own SDR. In fact, you looked at part of it. Some of it's up there. Sir, take over. Thank you.
Okay, so my audio on this, I'm using the microphone that's in the camera, and it keeps self-adjusting. How's my audio now, Joe?
It's a little weak, but it's okay. It's readable.
All right, I'll turn it back up and see if it stays there or not. Like I said, it keeps wanting to change itself here.
Yeah, that's fine.
Hopefully it'll stay put. If it drops off, let me know and I'll go back into it. Yeah, I see it moving right now. I'll just try to speak up here because apparently Zoom thinks it's smarter than I am and wants to set the audio by itself. So, good morning, everybody. Greg Ella here, November 0, Echo Mike Papa, Fort Collins, one of the members at large. We're talking today about software-defined radio. And today, when I'm talking about software-defined radio, I'm mostly talking about receivers and software-defined receiver technology. There are now also transmitters. I had my camera earlier sitting on my base station right now, which is an ICOM 7300 HF and 6 meter and an ICOM 9700 VHF UHF microwave transceiver, and they receive and transmit with SDR technology. Today I'm going to be talking about receivers mostly. I'm going to be talking about what is an SDR, why you want one, what you can do with it, some history of what's called affordable SDR technology for a hobbyist, and affordable means different things to different people, depending on how bad you want it. Joe can talk about affordable V8 engines for Mustangs and things. So I'll be going through some history and then where we're at today with how incredibly affordable these things are now compared to where they were just a few years ago. And kind of the community of software developers, all the open source stuff that's available now for software-defined radio, and the really smart people that have been brought into the RF field because of SDR. And I'm going to end up closing up talking about Kiwi SDR, which is a big family of online HF SDRs. James mentioned we have one up at Rattlesnake. I've got one here at my house. They're all over the world, and most of them are online and freely available for people to use, and the advantages of that. Okay, what is an SDR? The short answer is that an SDR is a box of hardware that sits between your coax and a computer. And it takes the RF out of the coax, turns it into ones and zeros, and puts it in the computer. So that the computer can do all the stuff that a regular hardware radio would do as far as tuning, demodulating, filtering, all those other things all happen in software. That's all you need to know technically about SDR to really use and enjoy the software. If you want to get into a little bit more detail, software-defined radio receivers use analog to digital converters to take an analog signal, which is RF in this case, and digitize it. In order to make that work, there's a little bit of hardware up front. There's some filtering, very little bit of filtering, pretty much a low-pass filter that blocks how high a frequency can get through, and I'll explain why in a moment. And then there's amplifying and attenuation to adjust the signal level to something that the analog to digital converter likes. And then there's just an interface, which used to be USB, Universal Serial Bus. Now they've gone on to Ethernet and some other things, USB 3, higher speed stuff, to get the signal into a computer. And again, in the computer, in software, is where all the stuff happens, like filtering, demodulation, audio processing and output, digital mode decoding, all that stuff that used to happen in hardware happens in software now. Because it happens in software, it's easy to upgrade things and experiment with stuff. If you need, some of you guys do CW, a lot of you guys, most everyone's looked at receiver specs for ham radio, and they look at how wide a filter they might have for single sideband or CW. And most of the conventional radios, the older super heterodyne radios, you could buy additional mechanical or actual physical filters that you would plug in. For instance, if you wanted a 500 hertz filter for narrowband CW, you'd buy one and take the top off of your radio and plug it in. And then you had a new option. You could select that 500 hertz filter. In software-defined radio, you just open a window and change your filter shape, drag and drop, or click on something to change your filter shape. So that's an advantage there. I talked about the input filtering. Analog to digital converters sample the signal. And one rule of sampling is you have to sample at least twice as fast as the highest frequency signal coming in, analog signal they're sampling. So they have a filter to block frequencies higher than that from getting in, because if they do get in, it will mess up the math, and you'll see things on the display that aren't really there or aren't really where it says they are, and you won't know what you're looking at anymore. So basically, real basic hardware, filter to block the higher frequencies you don't want, some level adjustment, digitizing, and into the computer it goes. If you want to really learn a whole bunch about how it works, there's a link I'll talk about later that you can go to and explore yourself. I've already sent out an email to everybody of links that I'm referring to today, and a couple slides that Darren's going to help me with as we get to those points, but you should have all that already. If someone didn't get it and they want it, send me an email, member@large@ncarc.net, and I'll forward you the links too. Okay, that's what an SDR receiver is. Why do you want one, and what can you do with it? The main thing for me, and I started off, I was a monitoring hobbyist for years before I got my ham license. And I got my ham license when I moved out here and started going into the backcountry. You get a spectrum display of a chunk of bandwidth that you can look at, as you were seeing earlier today on my radios. And you get a waterfall display if you want one that shows a history of a signal that's just come through. And that lets you see what the bands are doing. It lets you look for signals. If someone's using push to talk to transmit, like we normally do, if you have a conventional receiver and you're rolling along with the dial, tuning through the band, if you tune past somebody when they're in between transmissions, you're going to miss them and roll right past. With a spectrum display and a waterfall display, you're looking at that whole chunk of spectrum, and whenever somebody keys their mic, it pops up and you see it, and you know where it is, and you can click on it and tune to it. You can evaluate noise conditions of the band. You can look at noise floor. You can record that chunk of spectrum because it's going into your computer. You can record a whole chunk of spectrum, and depending on the equipment, you can record the entire HF band 0 to 30 megahertz onto your hard drive. And you can go back after the fact later on, go back in, replay that spectrum recording, find some signal you're interested in, tune to it, and listen to it. And if it's a digital mode, you can decode it. And if you're using the wrong decoder, you can go back and replay it and adjust all your settings until it works. So those are the big advantages of any SDR receiver. Also, they happen to be, some of them, extremely well-performing receivers as far as sensitivity, selectivity, and dynamic range. Bob Sherwood Engineering out here in northern Colorado, has a list on his website of receiver performance. And all the top receivers on his list now are software-defined radio based. Usually standalone receivers, like I was showing here, that you don't need to use a computer with. But there are things like the Yaesu FTDX 101D or FT101D, the Flex radios, the KX3, I believe, is software based once you get inside. And these ICOMs I have are all at the top of the list for performance. Any questions so far? I'll make sure my auto's still working here. We're all good, Joe? All right. History, a brief history of software-defined radio as far as what a consumer, not the military or the government, but what an end user, private individual hobbyist might be able to buy. Back around 2005, a company called RF Space, which was started by a ham down in Atlanta, Georgia, came out with an SDR-14. And I bought one of the first ones. This was my first SDR. This covered the HF band, 100 kilohertz to 30 megahertz. It ran on 12 volt DC. It used a USB 1.1 interface, and you could look at a bandwidth or record a bandwidth up to 160 kilohertz wide anywhere in the HF band. And you would have the spectrum display and the waterfall and all those things I talked about. This was 2005. This box cost $1,000. So that was affordable in 2005 if you really wanted those capabilities. If you wanted to look in the VHF or UHF spectrum, you could buy another radio to go along with it, like this. And this is an analog radio receiver. This is an ICOM 8500. HF, VHF, UHF, all the way up to 2 gigahertz. But whatever you tune in VHF or UHF, whatever frequency you tune in on the front, got down converted on a jack on the back to 10.7 megahertz, which could go into that SDR. So this was another $1,000 used. So for $2,000, you could look at HF, VHF, UHF spectrum at 160 kilohertz bandwidth. That was 2005. 2007, RSpace came out with this, which was the SDR-IQ. This only cost $600, and it used USB 2, which was faster, so you could look at 190 kilohertz of spectrum. So things were becoming more affordable now. Price had gone almost in half. 2013, some hams in England developed an amateur radio receiver called the FunCube dongle, and it covered some of the VHF and UHF portions. It was primarily designed for 2-meter receiving for some amateur satellites, which were called FunCubes. They were small satellites that were being put up. That only cost $200, and that was a dongle, meaning it plugged right into a USB port and you hooked an antenna up to it. So that was $200. So things were getting better and better as we went along there. Then kind of what I think is a watershed event also happened about the same time in 2012. This is about the time that we all went to digital TV. And when we went to digital TV here in the States from analog TV, Europe and Asia also did, but they went to what was called DVB-T, Digital Video Broadcast Terrestrial. Different format, but it was still digital TV. And when that happened, somebody came out with a little cheap dongle to use with a computer to hook up to a TV antenna and watch TV on your computer. And these things were mass produced because of the demand for them across 2 continents. So they were about $15 or $20 a piece for these little dongles. Well, a couple of smart hardware guys started looking at this, and they found out a couple very interesting things very quickly. It was a software-defined radio receiver. It put out the same stream of data into the computer that these other SDRs put out. It also had an undocumented test mode that you could put it into and control the tuning, the amplification of different stages inside this thing. And so you could use it for more than television. And it became a very cheap software-defined radio for like $20. And all sorts of free software came out for it. And it was made very cheaply. It was not only very cheap, it was made very cheaply. It didn't have to be very accurate as far as the tuning and stability went, because once it locked onto a TV signal, the software would adjust for any drift. It would just track in software. So some of the same people and others improved on the equipment a little bit. They put in a more stable reference oscillator for the what's called the clock that does the sampling. They made that more stable and more accurate, put in some better front end filtering, and came out with this dongle here and copies of it, which has these improvements. It has a metal case for shielding and thermal stability. And these are like 25 bucks now. And that gives you, for $25, you can go from about 24 megahertz up to 1.7 gigahertz. And before I was talking about you could look at 190 kilohertz of spectrum. Now you can look at like 6 megahertz or more of spectrum at one time and record it to your hard drive for 24 bucks. Now, different samplers, the analog to digital converters, have a different number of bits that they produce for each sample. These little $24 dongles produce an 8-bit sample. When you use more bits, you get more dynamic range, more sensitivity, more resolution. And every bit that you add doubles those things. So more bits is better. AirSpy, a company I've got in the links, airspy.us, they now make dedicated receivers. They cover the same range, 24 megs to 1.7 gigahertz, give or take. These are 12-bit receivers. They've got even better clocks and stability and filtering in them. And these perform incredibly well. USB powered, micro USB, still USB 2. But that's one of the links, and you can look at that. And those are $169. And for me, the improvement is worth it. I mean, I was paying in 2005 $1,000 for a radio. I'll gladly pay $169 for one instead that does so much more. They also have an HF version that goes from like 500 hertz up to through the HF band. Yeah, and those are both on their website. And I've got nothing to do with their company or their website or any kickbacks from their products. I'm just using these as a way of example. So that's kind of where we are with hardware, where we started off with hobbyist level, quote unquote, affordable equipment, where we are now. There's some resources now I want to talk about. I talked about these receiver dongles, which was called RTL-STR. RTL was the chip maker for the chip inside this thing. So that started some of the software and applications that were called RTL-STR applications. Well, then a blog started, and this is a very useful blog, and this is in your links. It's rtl-sdr.com, and that dash is very important because another website without it went defunct. There were a lot of very smart people, and are a lot of very smart people that do very interesting things with computers and software, but they were never into RF. These aren't ham radio operators or shortwave listeners, and the world of radio frequency was not open to them. And this little thing here served as a bridge between us and other users of the RF spectrum and these really smart people. And they are now doing, and we're all the way from some 14-year-old kid hobbyist that develops an app to PhD doctoral students that are doing their thesis on some RF thing and using SDR to test their thesis and prove their thesis for their doctorate. So there's the whole spectrum, no pun intended, of people out there using this stuff that didn't used to play with RF, and now they are. And that blog I mentioned, RTL-SDR, go to it, go back in the history. It's searchable by topic. You've got people experimenting with radio direction finding, decoding GPS signals, all sorts of different communications modes, making their own cellular telephones and their own cellular telephone towers. Out at Burning Man in Nevada, BlackRock, every year, they set up their own cellular service using software-defined radio and run their own little cell phone company for a week or two out there. All that stuff is on RTL SDR. Anything you want to do, ground penetrating radar, passive radar, which uses reflections of commercial broadcasts off of planes and stuff. There's just a ton of stuff there that these people are developing, and it's all free. The software is always all free, open source. Okay, I've talked about the website there and airspy.us. One caveat with the software. This is being developed by people all over the world, and laws are different in different parts of the world. There is free software out there that allows you to intercept telephone calls and decode pager traffic, alphanumeric pager traffic. Those things are not legal in the US if you're not the intended recipient of the communication. So my screen just timed out. There we are. Joe's my audio still up? My screen just blinked out for a second. Still good? Okay. So just because there's some software out there, make sure you're legal to use it. Pretty much, and I'm not a lawyer, but pretty much in the US, if anyone's using encryption and you do something to break that encryption, that's not legal. Or if it's something to do with telephone communication, cordless phone communication, cell phone, pagers, if you're not the intended recipient of that communication, don't mess with it. Keep yourself out of trouble. There's a couple big fields I'm just briefly going to touch on. There's a thing out there called GNU Radio, which is open source radio software for all this equipment, all this stuff. It has a component called GRC, or GNU Radio Companion. I'm not a programmer. GNU Radio uses blocks of functionality that you drag and drop onto a graphical user interface, and you connect them with lines. You drag and drop lines to connect these blocks. You set the parameter of all these blocks to build your own software, and then you click it and it runs. And that's the very short explanation of it. There's a link to that in the links I sent out. A side project of that is Osmocom, open source mobile communication. Typically uses GNU Radio, but they have a bunch of projects under that heading. They started off again with mobile communication. They were making their own cell phone towers and making their own cell phones and things like that. They've expanded now, and there's just a ton of stuff there. There's a link sent out. Take a look at it. There's a guy here in Colorado that's software-defined radio and hardware developer. His website is Great Scott Gadgets. And again, there's a link there. On his website, under education, he has a series of 11 videos on how all this stuff works, how to use GNU Radio, how to use GNU Radio Companion. And if you want to learn more about all that stuff, how digital sampling works and how to use those things, that's the place to start. And again, like I said, it's in those links. I just got a question on chat. Where are these links? For everyone that's a member at NCARC.net, I did send those out. Darren, can you post those to the website today after the meeting?
I can do that.
Okay, so they'll be posted up. It's one page of about 6 or 7 different links that I've talked about today. Darren might be pulling it up here at the moment. Yeah, there's the links right there.
Much there.
Yeah, that's the links. but Darren will post them here to this website afterwards. My last topic's gonna be on Kiwi SDR. Before I get into that, are there any questions so far on what I've gone over? Okay, Kiwi SDR. Unsurprisingly, this came out of either Australia or New Zealand. I think New Zealand. Some hams down there developed a software-defined radio for HF. It uses 16-bit sampling, so it's a really good receiver. But their purpose was to make it easily shareable by multiple users online. Prior to this, because SDR goes into a computer, any of this hardware could be shared online, but typically only one user at a time could control it. I talked about some of these receivers had like 190 kilohertz of spectrum that they could see. So you could have multiple users listen to different parts of a spectrum at the same time, but they all had to be in that little slice. And that wasn't real convenient. So Kiwi, and I've got one here, I don't know if this cord will reach. I'll try to, there's my Kiwi in that silver box sitting down there connected to an antenna and a LAN cable. So the Kiwi is an SDR receiver that sits on a small board computer. They use a BeagleBone as a computer, and that has an Ethernet jack, and it runs as a server. They sample the whole HF spectrum all at once and feed it into that computer. They process the spectrum display and waterfall and do some video compression so they can serve that out to multiple users so anyone can look at spectrum. And up to, depending on how it's configured, either 4 or 8 users at one time can connect to it, and they can pick what frequency they want to play with anywhere in that HF band, tune to it, zoom in on it, and listen to it, record it if they want, decode some different digital modes with some built-in decoders that are in Kiwi. And there's 2 links back on my link page. There's a link to an online map, rx.linkfunnel.net. And that map is clickable. You can zoom in. It's a worldwide map. When it comes up, you can zoom in, pick a Kiwi SDR receiver, click on it, and go to that receiver. And that's in my links. Darren, can you pull up that first Kiwi screen grab that'll have the purple help window on the bottom left?
For everyone's information, I posted the list of links to the chat window for the Zoom session. So you've got it there. And let me pull up the there. Believe this is the one you're looking for?
Yes. When you first go to somebody's Kiwi online, you pull it up. There's this purple window that says welcome on the bottom left. And it's got some basic instructions and where you can get more help. You click on that arrow at the top right of the purple field, and it slides off to the left and gets out of the way of your screen. By default, these things normally start with just a waterfall display, which you see at the top. Over on the right, there's a control panel where you can zoom in, zoom out, change frequencies, select bands, do all sorts of different things. And by clicking at the white arrow on the top right of that box, that will also slide out of the way if you don't want it on your screen. And when it slides off to the side, it's still there. And if you click back on it, it comes back on screen. Go to the next slide there, Darren. And this happens to be my SDR I have here at the house that I'm using for these slides. It could have been anyone's. Here, I have turned on the spectrum display on the top, which I prefer. Back on the control panel to the right, you see near the top a black bubble that says SPEC in green letters. That's spectrum, and that turns that on. I haven't zoomed in yet. You can see all the WWV signals, 2.5, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 megahertz. Over on the far left, you see the whole AM broadcast band, 540 to 1700 kilohertz. You get an idea what the noise floor is like. As you go up in frequency, the noise floor drops off. And you can either click anywhere on the spectrum or the waterfall to tune into something, or over here in the control panel on the bottom right, top left of the bottom right square, where you see the frequency, you can type a new frequency in there and hit enter. Next to that, there's a window that says select band. It's a pull down menu. It's got all the different international shortwave broadcast bands. It's got the international time frequencies. It's got all the amateur radio bands and some other stuff. So you can go to a band and select that. And like I said, you can zoom in and drag your frequency around, click to fine tune. Or you've got 3 minus signs and 3 plus signs in little circles near the top of the control panel. Those let you fine tune by different size steps. Okay, and the third slide there, Darren. Here I zoomed into part of the 20-meter band. And here you can see on both the spectrum and the waterfall, you can tell just by looking, you're looking at an upper sideband signal by the shape of the envelope of the energy and everything else. You can fine tune it. The yellow little bar above the waterfall here at 14,295. That's your filter. That's what you're going to hear on your audio. And you can drag that around. You can drag the width of it. You can drag either end of it to change the size and shape of the filter to any filter you want. So that's Kiwi SDR. It's in the links. It allows you to do a few things as an amateur radio operator. You can connect to a local SDR to see what's going on locally as far as band openings. You can pick a SDR in another location that happens to be quiet. If you have noise, if you want to work HF, but you've got noise at your house, you can use a remote SDR as a receiver. Some of these SDRs are being used now by net operators of some of the HF nets like Wyoming Cowboy Net, High Noon Net. Sometimes they use a receiver in Utah or Idaho because they can't hear everybody that's trying to check into the net. And if they use a remote receiver, they can hear people they would have missed. You can look at your own transmit signal off somebody's remote SDR to see, first of all, if you're propagating to that location. These things are all over the country and all over the world. You can look to see if you're reaching a particular area on a particular band. And you can also look at the quality of your signal and try to get an idea if you're overmodulating or something like that. If you're using a digital mode, you can tell if you're overdriving and splattering by looking at your own signal from somewhere else. Any questions? That's about all I've got for SDR today.
Hey, Greg, have you talked to any about the Web SDR project?
Web SDR, I've played with that. I have some issues with it. the Kiwi SDR software that gives you the whole HF spectrum was based on WebSDR. And it was modified for that application, but it only works with the Kiwi.
Well, WebSDR doesn't have nearly the population that the Kiwi group has, but if I can share my screen, I want to show you a picture, see if this works. I don't know if it's showing or not. Let's see.
Should have permission.
Okay, there's that. That should bring up the web page. Share. And I want to change tabs and see if it'll let me do that. That is a picture of the log periodic of the WebSDR receiver in Utah. And there's that site, and then another site in California that uses the old Loran antenna field, and they have amazing receive capability, but the software is not nearly as flexible as the Kiwi system. But if you want to see if you're trying to talk locally on 80 meters in the morning and there's no short skip, all you need to do is crank in one of these WebSDR or Kiwi receivers somewhere else, and generally you'll hear what's going on.
Yeah, like I said, I looked at WebSDR. I wanted to take my AirSpy 24 megs to 1.7 gigs, and I wanted to put it up at Rattlesnake on a Discon and use WebSDR as the server. The problem with the original software, which is developed by a guy in Germany, or I don't know if it was the original developer or the current developers in Germany, and there are some regulations over there and some sensitivities about being able to just receive anything anywhere. So he deliberately crippled his software to where when you set it up, you had to pick a center frequency, like somewhere in the 2 meter band or one of the amateur bands that was legal for everyone to listen to. And then you could only see so much of that spectrum. And it was in his software, you couldn't just go in as a user off-site and put in a different center frequency. That wasn't allowed. And even as an administrator, it was very difficult. You had to make presets for each band you wanted to listen to, and you could only see a small chunk of that band. So even though the hardware had the capability, the software was deliberately crippled, and that turned me off personally. But for some applications, like Rob said here, looking at some HF bands, it's fine. It just didn't do what I wanted it to do.
Greg, can you talk to the pan adapter capabilities of the ICOM 7300 and 9700? Or
yeah, they both have, as you saw, I'll pull it back up here. They have both a waterfall and a spectrum display, and you can adjust the span. Oh, maybe if I do that, it'll help. Well, this camera isn't picking that screen up very well because it whites out and washes out, but they have both a panoramic display, which is the graph on the top, and then they have what's called a waterfall, which is a descending track of what happened. And on both of those radios, you can adjust it up to plus or minus 500 kilohertz. There's a span button. Every time you hit the span, it changes the size. There's also some software. I haven't played with it, but apparently you can export that screen and put it on a bigger computer screen for a nicer waterfall display.
Yeah, and just to warn people on that one, Greg, it exports the waterfall information over 115 kbaud serial, so it's absolutely terrible as a remote adapter. So don't try to use it like an SDR. It's not nearly as good.
Yeah. The other thing I'm not happy with, the radios are excellent radios, and they perform very, very well for what they're designed to do. They could have done a little bit more, and I think I know why they didn't. But when we talk about this data that's coming out of one of these SDRs and going into your computer, it's normally called IQ data, which is in phase and quadrature phase. So there's two samplers, and if you call one of them, call your first sampler the in phase one, it takes a sample on every clock step of your sampling clock. The Q sampler or quadrature sampler takes another sample a quarter of a step later. And by having these two data streams, what they call IQ data, that has all the information you need to demodulate, display and demodulate RF signals. And IQ data is what you record on a hard drive if you're recording a chunk of spectrum and you want to come back later and decode it and demodulate it and tune around and listen to it after the fact. ICOM could have put an IQ output on these two receivers, so you could take raw IQ data, put it into your computer, run any software you want, and you could have high resolution spectrum and panoramic displays, record bands to hard drive, do all sorts of processing and things. They didn't do that. The other thing they could have done is on the ICOM 9700, it directly digitizes the 2 meter and the 70 centimeter spectrum. So it has a very fast set of analog to digital converters, unheard of a couple of years ago for anything that anyone other than the government could buy. They could have made that radio where you could receive outside of the amateur radio bands, but they didn't. They can only receive, and this is by software or firmware that's in the radio. You can only tune it in the 2 meter, 70 centimeter, 1.2 gig bands. I think they did that because they also sell the ICOM 8600, which is a receiver only, and it covers HF to like 3 gigahertz. Very nice SDR receiver. It receives everywhere except they blocked the US version for 800 megahertz cell phone by law. And it has the IQ output. It has all the other bells and whistles, but it's $2,000 or $2,200 right now. I've been watching the price. So I think that's why they limited what the 7300 and the 9700 could do, is to help sell the 8600 receiver. That's just my conspiracy theory. Any more questions, anyone?
I said one other comment, if people are interested, the PTRX 7300 is an RF output, RF output that you can monitor your 7300 after the front preamp stage into an SDR. And it's kind of a nice little accessory gadget if you do have an SDR, like I have an SDR play connected to it. And it's really nice for running simultaneous monitoring through the 7300 through a single antenna.
That reminds me of one other thing. There are a lot of the conventional HF receivers or transceivers, the ham-rated transceivers, you know, Kenwoods, Aces, ICOMs, that are a conventional super heterodyne receiver, that you can tap the first IF frequency with a high impedance amplifier that doesn't load the signal down, so you don't lose sensitivity. You can tap that and feed it into a SDR going to a laptop or a computer, so you can have a panoramic display for your older radio that doesn't have one. And it's an inexpensive way to add that to a conventional receiver.
Greg, this is Roger. I haven't pursued it, but I think the 7610 may have some sort of IQ feature in one of the later firmware stages or firmware versions.
I think it might. I know it has some more capabilities. It's a dual HF and 6-meter receiver.
Right.
It's got 2 screens and two separate receive chains. It can do a lot more. In simple terms, it's 2 ICOM 7300s, but it's really more than that. It performs better, but it costs a lot more than 2 7300s. And I haven't bought one, but I think you're right. They may have added a few things to it, but it is a lot more expensive than 2 7300s would be.
Yep.
I know it'll do binaural reception, so you can have 2 antennas spread apart going to the 2 receivers and put them both on the same frequency. And if you get fading on one channel, you may not on the other. And there's some other neat things you can do with that. Okay, check out the links I sent out. Email any questions you don't have today, and enjoy the rest of your weekend. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Greg. I do appreciate everything you did. You gave this presentation about 2 years ago, and I thought now would be an excellent time because we've got more people that are involved in this and are new folks in. So thank you very much. Any other comments or questions for the club meeting? If not, I've sent notes to Darren and James and Jim. You did not reply. If you could stay just a few minutes afterwards. Will that work for you, Jim? Dixon?
Yeah, it'll work. I just sent you a reply to Joe.
Oh, okay. Okay, I didn't see it.
I just seen it.
Okay. We're just going to talk about a few things, but if nothing else, we'll see you next
Joe?
month. Yes, sir.
Joe?
Ooh.
Hey,
Yes.
This is Dick, KE0ME.
Yes, Dick. What can I do for you?
You know, I was just listening to that first part before the meeting started about the noise isolation. I've been having a lot of trouble with that, and I've, had some successes and not successes. Just wonder if maybe we could make that into a meeting topic one time, if we haven't already done it. I don't know. I may have missed it in the past.
Well, Greg would be the guy. He found out my problem. So.
Yeah. Well, it's just that I think, at least for me, it's just kind of a daunting place where to start. There are so many possibilities, from the solar controllers, I know there, gosh, I can't remember the gentleman I talked to about a year ago. There's a very good structured approach, and they mentioned some of them, like, just turn everything off, put your radio on battery, and, things like that. Then you start, putting breakers on to see if noise is internal, external, just kind of almost maybe a roadmap program, just on a roadmap of how to proceed. Because I tell you right now, I have got about an S7 noise wideband, all frequencies, all, HF. There's a few little, recurring things, but just in general, the noise floor is just extremely high. I also have 3 teenagers and 2 adults who are very committed to, internet access. So we've got wall warts all over the place. I mean, hundreds of them, I'm sure. But, I don't know where to start. Is it the power line? Is it, the solar controllers, whatever. So yeah, I just thought that might be kind of an interesting, topic. It might involve a lot of people trying to figure out what in the heck is causing all my noise.
It's a good topic. We'll have discussion with my experts, so to speak, and see if we can't put something together. Thank you.
Okay. Well, and here again, if he does house calls, I just need to know what the compensation is, whether it's in pizza or, other beverages, or just, what service call costs.
Greg, how many cases do you charge for this?
I'm a big fan of very dark colored fermented grains. So,
got a Roger on that.
Yeah.
Oh, all right. That I just thought I'd bring it up. That's all.
Thanks, Dick. I appreciate that. Anybody
All
else?
right.
No, don't ever feel sorry. That's what we're here for. Anything else? Okay, well, thank you very much. First of all, Darren, and you guys can listen to this. It's just stuff.
This presentation was brought to you by the Northern Colorado Amateur Radio Club. For more information, visit our website, ncarc.net. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe.